and it got really out of control. Just recently did a project with 6 or 8 developers. Everybody just did his own JS as it felt like it, and afterwards we had about 50 files, 50 HTTP requests, and they started conflicting with each other, and it really wasn't very nice, but it worked. So started looking for different ways to organize. Our Rails apps are really well organized. They use a model view control approach. There's really strict folder definition. There's a strict separation of code between the models and the controllers and what it looks like. It makes it really easy to maintain, and it makes it really easy for other developers to come in and figure out what's going on, which we couldn't do with the other thing. The other thing we use is Sinatra, which is kind of like Rails. It is basically a model view controller, although some people think it's not. And it uses a route-based system that's really simple. It uses get, put, post, and delete requests, so RESTful. And it makes a nice little easy application frame. So, why not try this in JavaScript? And Aaron Quinn is a developer in Brooklyn, and he came up with Sammy, which is based on Sinatra. So we want Rat Pack puns here. And like Sinatra, it's based on using get requests, put requests, post, delete, and it sets everything up based on routes. So this is a little Sinatra Hello World app, and if you go to an index page, you get Hello World. Very simple, really easy to understand. It's a little more complicated. You can post requests and so on. Sammy just builds on this, and instead of using a regular URL, it uses a page hash. Although you can now use a regular URL for newer browsers. Just like Sinatra, it's route-based, it's RESTful, it's really easy to organize everything. So, what's it good for? Well, you can do single-page apps with it, which are getting more and more popular with Gmail. Twitter uses a very similar approach. You get the bookmarking and back buttons still, and you can organize your code with it. So there's the same application as Sinatra and Sammy. See here, you get requests. When you go to the hello page hash, it just appends the body with hello. And using this really simple approach, you can build up really complicated applications right inside the browser. So doing a basic Sammy app looks like this. You've got to declare your variable for the Sammy, and then you can set up all your routes inside of it, and then you can automatically run it when the page loads. You don't have to run it when you get that hash as well. So it's got the basic verb, path, and callback. So you have the get, post, or whatever here, and then the path, and then a function that what you want to do. It's a very simple setup. So there's our get request again. Post looks like this. So we could set up a post, for instance, to build something, to do a jQuery AJAX request, and then when it's successful, it just redirects back to whatever Sammy did. You can set up put is the same way. And what's really nice, you get this params on less params. So instead of having to go find your form, serialize your form just sends params like a Rails app or a PHP app. And it can grab those parameters, pull out what it needs, and send that to the server. You can use these to get the ID or whatever you want to send. You can also set up your route here, variables. And then this variable becomes params ID, just like in RAM or Sinatra. Delete works the same, right? The other thing you can do is you can bind events. You don't have to have a route, but you can have an event. So for instance, if you make an AJAX request and something goes wrong, you can have an event called error, and you can just trigger this event. So you can reuse your application, your code this way to make a nice modular application and bind everything up. Sammy is just like Sinatra. It's trying to keep it really, really small and clean. Sinatra's about 1,000 lines of code and actually reduced it. Sammy's got the same idea. So he's built a lot of plugins on top of it to add some functionality. It's got the Google Analytics plugin, because of course if you visit the page hash, that's not going to trigger your Google Analytics. Google does allow for this. Sammy has an automatic plugin to set that all up. There's also a title. The page title, of course, doesn't change if you do the page hash. It can automatically change the page title. Not all browsers support JSON. You can use JSON really nicely to work back and forth between the server building and an API. Internet Explorer doesn't have very good support for JSON, so you need to include that. Sammy offers the plugin, which is just a wrapper. Most of these are just wrappers of other libraries that are built for Sammy. And then nested parameters, which is really nice. If you're used to Rails and PHP, nest your parameters and pull out different. There's a whole bunch of them. The documentation is really nice. If you want to set up a plugin to use it, all you have to do is declare it in your application. And then it's just automatically loaded. You have to load it, of course. And they're all listed here, Sammy doc. So that's the controllers part of the model view controller. The views part is also from Sammy. And it builds a huge amount of templates. So you can have different templating languages, such as Haml, Mustache, jQuery, Meld, Pure. We only use Haml and Mustache. I don't know if anyone knows Haml. It's a compiled HTML. Mustache is really nice. It's just HTML with some placeholders. There's a jQuery template from Microsoft, actually. And, yeah, amazing. And that's just embedded jQuery inside of HTML. Meld, Pure, or other ones. Mustache templates look like that, or you declare them like this. You have to send an object with variables, and you can just fire it off. So you've got the app render here. This is what calls the template. Send your object, and here you can append it once it's been rendered. Template will look basically like that. Some HTML or text, placeholder, and it comes out. It's also got some support for conditionals and loops, but really the idea of Mustache is you don't have any logic at all in your template. Really just a pure view presentation there. Haml's a little more complicated. Haml comes from the Ruby world. It's also been ported to PHP, I know, and a couple other languages. You declare it again, just like that. Template. Instead of having the tags, you just have a white space-based template. So the white space becomes important. And again, it renders it. It's got conditionals. It's also got support for loops. The only basic. Sammy also offers some helpers, which are, again, based on Rails. Lets you organize your code a little better, reuse it. In Rails, we always talk about keeping everything dry, don't repeat yourself. So this allows you to keep everything organized, keep it easily modular, so you can build it up. Good example of building a small helper. I have my application. Here, that's my Sammy application. I can load the index, which was last slide. Just makes my partial, and then it runs a callback if I send one. Here, I have my index. It loads it with. I have my index in my index application, and here I have my single view. If I want to run that index first, I can first run the helper, and then the second part gets called as a callback. And using this structure, you can build really complicated applications. And you can also make sure that something is built up here when you go to this URL, or when it's on that URL. So you can allow it to reload. You can allow for better, more complicated applications. So Sammy doesn't do any sort of models. Sammy doesn't. It has a little bit of basic storage. It uses cookies, but it doesn't build a real model layer. Some way that I can build up a complicated object. I can connect to the server and centralize my Ajax or anything like that. There's another library, again based on some Rails stuff, called JS Model. It's largely inspired by Active Record from Rails. It's a RESTful, again. It connects to a backend, but it's not just a JSON wrapper or anything. It doesn't always connect to the backend to make anything. It really builds up a whole collection of objects. It builds a whole object inside your browser. So instead of just having a JSON request for every single time you want to talk to it, you build up a whole collection, and you can actually save, and modify the collection, and then connect it to your browser. And what's really great about this is it takes all your AJAX calls and puts them for just that model. You don't have to make any AJAX calls anywhere else inside the application. It's kind of like an ORM if you used it, Object Relation Management, for Rails or for PHP. Centralizes your connection back to the server. So you start out with just declaring a model. You give it a name and it scans JavaScript object. Once you've got your model, you can make a new instance of it. You can give various attributes. Set the attributes, you can save them. You can set the different events to happen on save. For instance, you can make a JSON request so that it saves it back to the server. You can trigger events in your view. It lets you organize the whole thing on a different level than just the SAMmy. And just like Active Record or something else from Rails, you're fine. You can get the first object, you can get all the objects. It lets you organize everything. It also allows for class properties, instance properties. So you can really describe your model. You can give it different attributes defined by name, just like in Rails. So you can find your objects based on different attributes. Makes it really easy to work with things. You can also give instance properties. So each instance of the model can have some. And finally, it's got a RESTful adapter. So it has, as it stands now, it's got an included RESTful adapter, which lets you declare a URL, and it connects to a Rails app or PHP app. If you need to change the way this URL works, it's pretty easy to create your own RESTful adapter based on the whole thing is modularly built up. And it's really nice little library. So put it all together, and you end up with a nice SAMmy app as a model backend. And so I've got my SAMmy app here, and I can go and just do my save when I do a post, end up with a real application. I can go through the whole application and build up a CMS or whatever I need. I build a real application inside of the browser. The only thing that the server does is connect to the database. So it's a completely different way of working. I have a real thin client on the back, or thin server, and a fat client. The whole application ends up happening inside the browser. So you usually have one page, and you can do everything. The other thing it lets you do is organize all your scripts in a much better way. So here, looks more like a Rails application. I've got my controllers, my models, and the library stuff I need, and then all my vendor, jQuery, sammy, different plugins, and that. In this way, I have a much better application set up. And I can use the script to combine all these into a single file, and then I only have one HTTP request as well. So instead of having this mess that I had before, now I've got this really nice application that's really easy for me to maintain. It's very easy to explain to other developers. They can come in and understand what's going on in just a few minutes, and they see the whole structure. So why would I do this? You can add small parts of activity of application to your app. You don't have to do the whole thing as well. You don't have to make a single page app. You can keep everything organized, centralized. But the big question is, what happens if I don't have JavaScript? Now, of course, if I have a single page app and I don't have JavaScript, if I go to that page, nothing's going to happen. So what we usually do is build our entire app so it responds both to the JavaScript and not the JavaScript. Okay, that's a lot of work. Depends on whether or not you need to do this. If it's a front-facing app, then I really need to do this because, well, people may not have JavaScript. Google certainly doesn't have JavaScript. So we build everything to work first without JavaScript, then we add the application on top. In the recent version of SAMmy, there's something that makes this a lot easier. And there's support for HTML5 history object. So instead of using the page hash, I can use the entire, I can use a normal URL. That URL doesn't change the location of the browser, but only triggers something in my JavaScript. So it looks like a completely normal URL, but it's only triggering JavaScript. Unfortunately, this does not work in most of the older browsers. It doesn't work in Internet Explorer at all, I don't think. I'm not sure 9 supports it at all. Firefox from 4 supports it. WebKit supports it. So you need to make sure that it works with the normal page hash and with this other HTML5 history object. Like I mentioned before, search engines present kind of a problem. We had to program the last website we did so that the search engine would find it and then trigger the SAMmy app to do something afterwards. So it's not really built twice, but it's built for 2 different responses. The other thing you could do is use the hash bang, but we haven't really gone down that route yet, like Twitter does. Google says it will follow this. I have not explored it. But it's better for us to build it to Gradle. So the last part of the whole puzzle is testing. And coming from the Rails world, I've been taught again and again that I have to have everything really well tested. And when you end up building such a large, complicated application, there's no way to maintain it without having good tests. So there's a couple libraries, and I know that there's going to be a presentation today about a new one. But we do Jasmine tests and also do Zombie tests. And there's another library called Selenium, which we don't really use, which runs the entire browser through Firefox. It's a Firefox plugin. And there's also a Ruby library called Capilar, which lets you program the entire application. You can go through, fill out the forms, press all the buttons, make sure that everything's working. You can even upload files and check the entire application. Yeah. So Jasmine is more of a unit test. So Jasmine test, for instance, if I have a small helper method like this that builds me a path, I just pass it some variables and I get my path out. I can just build a nice little Jasmine test that says should return URL, checks if the path really matches what is expected to be. Using those, I can just test all the basic functions. That doesn't really test what's in the browser. What I really need to do as a front-end developer is really know that the browser, the DOM is really responding to what I want it to do, what I've shaken out or what I've added is really there. So for that, we use Zombie. Zombie is a little browser written in Node.js. It's really fast. It doesn't render anything. It just has an HTML parser and it builds a DOM object. It goes to each page, tests the DOM, and then makes sure it really works. I have a little Zombie test here. And all I have to do is say visit my URL. And this can be any URL, it doesn't have to be a local URL. Test if it's actually got the text widgets, if it's actually got CSS selectors, and then I've got a nice test. This is really, really fast. If it fails, it gives nasty little messages. If it passes, it doesn't say anything. But other than that, it's a great way to test. And you do have to install Node, which is not for everybody. So some examples. I just worked on a project called Band Planet. And in Band Planet, we have a player. Lives on every page. Looks like that. And this player is entirely a SAMmy application. So whenever I hit play, it changes the URL, it loads all the scripts into my player, and it runs the entire player. That's okay, it's kind of cool. But the really important part about it is it's got this playlist manager. So I've got a playlist here. And this is run completely with SAMmy and a JSON API that talks to our application. So every time a user adds or subtracts a song to the playlist, it adds it in there. And the player is built so that when I surf to the next page, the player continues on playing. So the playlist needs to stay current. SAMmy runs all this. It makes calls to the application, checks out the entire playlist. It builds this entire element here. This isn't written in HTML, but this is all written in SAMmy. So when the application loads, this is blank and it builds up everything. It builds the entire playlist when you add or subtract songs. This actually spins when you play, download songs. All the information from the song is generated using models. I have a model for my album, a model